Hi, and welcome to episode 150 of the 4Ps. And as the sole remote virtual participant in my family's Passover Seder this past weekend, I admit to being only partially engaged in the experience. While everyone else was struggling to make it through an in-person express Seder, I just didn't have the motivation of my mom's brisket waiting for me at the finish line to stay focused. The 4Ps. Professional. Political. Practical. Personal. The fact that so many families held in-person gatherings is both promising and troubling. And the same thing is coming with the week ahead for Easter. I hope everyone was and will be careful. I know we were. My wife, parents, in-laws, all are several months now post-vaccine, and were able to get together responsibly in person with my children while I watched on Zoom from the comfort of my own couch. Little did they know, or maybe they did know, or suspected, that I had positioned the phone, the camera, right next to the television so I could also watch the NCAA Tournament Sweet 16 games. I make no secret about the fact that I've had real struggles with organized religion going all the way back to my childhood. And at the risk of alienating like 95% of the people who do believe in some sort of higher power, I don't. I also just struggle with the violence, the discrimination, the destruction to which many religions have contributed, both directly and indirectly. And I'm not going to ignore the positive contributions that religion has brought, a sense of morality, community, Hanukkah and Christmas presents. But the fact that everyone believes their religion is right or preferred or chosen, that's inherently problematic. Perhaps my biggest issue is the fact that most religions discourage or actively prevent the questioning of authority. Clearly, that is something that I would have a problem with. So while the others were gathered in person, my mind also began to wander and think about unrelated topics and questions. Actually, I had 4 questions. I will ask and answer them here. The first question is something practical. And you're not going to believe this, but about a day before that big tanker ran aground in the Suez Canal last week, I happened to ask someone randomly during a Zoom call, how many of those giant shipping containers you think there are sitting on docks and ports or somewhere in storage around the world? Then fast forward, we get a week of images all over news websites and Twitter that inspired memes of all of these containers stacked, right? There are hundreds, thousands of them stacked on the sides of roads. And my first thought when I saw what was happening in Egyptian waters is, was I in some way responsible for this big coincidence? Like, did me wondering whether, as we're talking about it, whether I had something to do with this, even in some butterfly effect way? Probably not. But you've probably asked a similar question about what's in these things, or where are they, or why are there so many of them? Especially if you've ever driven up and down the East Coast, whether in New York or Philly or Baltimore, all the way down to Miami, or even on the Pacific Coast, Long Beach, San Francisco. There are thousands, you see them, thousands of them stacked hundreds of feet in the air. Some have probably been in the exact same place for years. They're used to ship a variety of goods internationally and domestically. They're easily moved from ships to tractor trailers to freight trains carrying everything from raw materials to cars, right, shipped across oceans and continents. Now, a quick Google search, which I did, will tell you that there are about 17 million shipping containers scattered across the globe. 17 million. Many of them are in terrible condition, but salvaging them for scrap metal or recycled parts often requires a level of financial investment that many shipping companies are just not willing to make. Their margins are at stake. So why am I talking about this? As our planet gets smaller and dirtier, yet more digitally advanced, this surplus, this excess of containers is never going to be right-sized ever again. We have too many. In fact, fewer than half, only about 5 million, are currently active at any given time. Now, from an environmental concern, approximately 97% of them are made in China, right? And many are now being deliberately sunk to the ocean floor just because there's nowhere else to put them. Yes, they might become coral reefs, but let's just hope that as much of the harmful material as possible is removed before that's happening. Some of these things actually fall to the bottom of the sea by accident. According to insurance records, about 1,000 are actually lost at sea each year. Imagine all that precious cargo at the bottom of the ocean, something that these companies just deem as an acceptable loss. About 95% of global shipping still happens on water, but the volume of goods shipped is actually on the decline. In total, about 200 million trips. These containers make 200 million trips each year. But that number is decreasing. So as we think about things like sustainability, there's definitely something to be said about shopping and sourcing locally whenever possible. We know about reducing our carbon footprint, but let's start thinking about reducing our cargo footprint as well. Something professional. And that question is, what happens when marketing and medicine mix? Like in my family, there's still an astonishing number of people who do not want to get the COVID-19 vaccine, which kind of astounds me. While the percentage of global and U.S. citizens who have gotten one or both of the vaccines actually continues to rise pretty impressively, far too many are still choosing not to, even if they're eligible, at least not yet. 34% of Americans say they are not likely to get the vaccine. That was a March 8th poll. At least it's down from the 63% from the poll taken back in September. We've still got a long way to go with a hardcore group of anti-vaxxers. Doctors and scientists couldn't convince them. Local and national government leaders haven't swayed them. So who's next? Obviously, advertisers, naturally. As the husband of a talented and passionate and caring physician, I've experienced the pandemic through her own experiences as well as my own. It's been a devastating set of circumstances, but just a terrible year for the medical community. But to see how they rally around each other and support and uplift each other is tremendously inspiring. But now it's time for them to take a well-deserved break and let marketers do our thing. The Ad Council, which is made up of major brands and media companies and even community-based organizations, it's collaborating to extend the reach of this important messaging across all channels. And with apologies to the doctors, whose medical memes I do enjoy while overlooking my wife's shoulder while she's on social media. This Ad Council initiative is one of the largest public education efforts in U.S. history, supporting the campaigns designed to reach very distinct audiences. And the partner list is impressive. Apple, Facebook, Twitch, Sesame Workshop, Verizon, the Black Information Network, Fox, Google, iHeart, the NAACP, the NHL, NBC Universal, all the N's, Walmart, Warner Media, a lot. The first content that we've seen is around this message, it's up to you. And it shows that we've been listening to America's top questions that are being asked by lots of people, and that we understand the concerns. And we're working to educate and empower people across the country, particularly, and most importantly, communities of color, Black and Hispanic communities who have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. The Ad Council's research shows that Black and Hispanic Americans who are undecided are significantly less confident that they have enough information to guide their decision about getting the COVID-19 vaccine, certainly compared to those intending to get the vaccine. So let's do this. Let's do this, marketing people. Let's use the MFAs and the MBAs and specialized skill sets that we have as marketers to pick up where the MDs and PhDs and RNs and other medical experts and scientists left off. Let's leverage our insights and our knowledge of audience segmentation and digital strategy and copywriting and video editing and all those skills. Let's save the world, one shot at a time. Also, marketing people, don't forget to do your timesheets this week. Something personal. How many games are the Mets going to win this year? Real baseball resumes this week. That's right. Opening day is this week. And I've tried my best all spring to temper expectations and keep my hopes for a New York Mets World Series run in check. But it's hard. The Mets have the best pitcher in baseball, Jacob deGrom, and traded for one of the most talented up-and-coming, I mean, he's not even up-and-coming, he's a superstar, Francisco Lindor. They improved in many areas, yet still missed out on a few opportunities, and that's what I have swirling in my mind, right? What could put them over the top? The gap between vision and reality certainly closed, but by how much? Like every year, except for maybe last year, because that was a unique set of circumstances and a shortened season, I enter the baseball season seeing the upside for my favorite team. That's how sports fans should think about going into any season, right? You believe until otherwise disappointed. That happens a lot with Mets fans. But the potential and expectations are always at the highest starting on opening day. And the Mets have the best opening day record in baseball history, having won almost, twice as many games as they've lost on opening days. So for the record, I'm going to predict that the Mets win 90 games and earn a wild card spot. That would be fun. And while there are open questions, right, the bullpen, team health, third base, left field defensively, the biggest question this season is, am I going to be able to go to games? I don't know. Will I feel comfortable? By the time the Mets return home from the opening road trip, I will be fully vaccinated. That's right. The games are outdoors, and I'm sure seating will be spaced out. Masks are still going to be required, or some positive or proof of negative test or vaccine in order to get in the stadium. So what about in June or July or in the warmer months? Am I going to feel good? How far along will we as a society be by then? Will I even feel comfortable being around other people in public? I'm trying not to think about it too much yet and just enjoy this hopeful enthusiasm and optimism that I have going into another season. And something political, the fourth question, which is, how important is data privacy to you? There are a number of political and social issues that are just no-brainers for me, right? The positions that I've held for most of my life are they're part of my moral makeup and have been for decades. They generally put me, pretty clearly, I guess, on the liberal side of the spectrum, which is not a surprise for anyone who has been with me for the previous 149 editions of the 4Ps. But data privacy is something that isn't very clearly aligned with either party, and doesn't really tie to any specific platform. Well, my professional knowledge of digital and social platforms has probably desensitized me, I am aware. I do think the average American would be shocked to learn how much information they have about us at every moment. Governments, corporations, they're accessing and gathering and storing data about us. They do it without asking you and without telling you. They collect our location. They collect known sexual preferences and learn about our health problems, our political convictions, and our cognitive capacities, and a lot more. Oddly enough, I've been okay with it up until now. It never really bothered me. I have nothing to hide. I don't really think anyone is out to get me. But I know I am in the minority here, and many believe this to be unacceptable. They believe our freedom and our democracies are at stake. And you know what? They're probably right. Ubiquitous surveillance has become a fact of 21st century life. It's nearly, not entirely, impossible to avoid. Anyone born after the year 2000 doesn't know any different, and that's where the digital dividing line is now drawn. The data economy only really kicked off in this century. TVs didn't listen in on our conversations. Even mobile phones couldn't track our movements before the year 2000. Before Google's rise to power, about 20 years ago, personal data didn't yet have any commercial value, but they figured out that the searches its users made could be used to sell targeted advertising. For the first time, a company began to use personal data to build precise profiles on individual users and sell this information to third parties. And it made them a very valuable company. Other companies, from Microsoft and Facebook to banks to Nike and Disney, they've all followed suit. And the data economy has transformed citizens into products. The most well-documented use of personal data, as we've already mentioned, is targeted, customized advertising all over the internet, really, right? On your apps and your social media feeds. Sometimes it can be useful, such as when retargeted ads remind us of products that we actually can use and search for, but didn't buy. But it does become a problem when elections are impacted, right? We know in 2016, personal data enabled Cambridge Analytica to identify people it referred to as persuadables, and then specifically targeted them with customized propaganda and fake news that got Donald Trump elected. Other companies use your personal data not to influence you, but to discriminate against people. Consumer rating companies keep a secret score on you based on your data. This score is then used by all sorts of companies to determine things like how long you're put on hold when you call them and whether or not you're eligible to return a product. So while I am not a victim or target of surveillance capitalism, I know others are, and that is a problem. Inequality is the essence of the data economy. Through your data, you're targeted and you're treated differently. I care about your privacy because the lack of it degrades your freedom, equality, and ultimately mine as well, and democracy. While brands, marketers, and other corporate entities thrive on data, it's also dangerous. When it leaks out into the world, it can damage lives, ruin businesses, threaten public safety. Cybersecurity can be expensive. Not every company is equipped to do it the right way. And when there's a data leak, individuals suffer. As I said earlier, I have nothing to hide, but data leaks and privacy breaches make us vulnerable. Privacy isn't about hiding your wrongdoing, it's about protecting yourself from the wrongdoing of others. As long as your data is out there, you never know who's going to get a hold of it and what they're going to do with it. Which gets me to the most recent hearings on Capitol Hill, where big tech CEOs were invited in. It wasn't really as much about privacy as it was about accuracy of information, but as Senator Amy Klobuchar pointed out, these companies have been winning an ideological war against us. They've convinced us that privacy is an outdated value, and they've successfully dressed up a system of mass surveillance and coercion in the name of progress and innovation. The platforms have a vested interest in people believing that their technologies are inevitable, right? That they're driving society forward. But this way of thinking ignores the role that public sentiment and government regulation play in directing technological development. But don't we need to collect personal data to promote the innovation of ethical technologies? While it's true that the tech companies need some of your data for their services to function, that doesn't mean they need to collect everything about you and store that data indefinitely. Waze, Google Maps, my favorite apps for navigating traffic. They need to know where I am, but it doesn't need to know who I am. And this is why this is something political. We do need to regulate the data economy. We need to do it the right way. Not with fear, not with scare tactics, but with intelligence and individual safety at the forefront. The tech industry developed faster than governments were able to regulate it. But with strong and smart leaders now in place, we can and need to pass some modest legislation that protects our right to privacy online. And when that happens, as we start to see, the tech giants will fall in line. I'm not advocating a ban on targeted advertising, but I do think our government should ban the trade of personal data. People's private lives shouldn't be a commodity that companies can share or sell or exploit for a profit. We currently live in a world where it's legal for corporations to profit from the knowledge that someone lost a child in a car accident or that they're the victim of sexual abuse. We must demand the right to control our own data. We should be asked clearly for our consent before our data is collected, and we should be able to see our data and contest it if it's not accurate. And we should have the right to delete it at any time. Those are my 4 questions. Those are my 4 answers. Have a great week. We're off next week for the holiday, but we'll see you back in a couple weeks for episode 151.